drinking that liquid death. If
So
we
good.
say it enough, we'll get sponsored.
This is the only sponsor that we really need.
I mean,
I think it's like particularly for something like for the brand that this is, the podcast.
I mean,
itself,
I know the guy who's like the head of their marketing. He went to Creative Circus. I have his email. I could email him. Be like, hey.
I mean, it seems a little forward, but I guess that's how you do business.
Can you give me a job and or will you sponsor my podcast? Also, what's up? How you doing?
Yeah.
It's been a while. We haven't spoken in like 6 to 7 years.
You should open with like, hey, buddy, notice you're doing pretty well. Good
Saw
for
you on all of the awards. They sponsored the moped rally I was at. What? Yeah.
Oh, did they?
Them and
I know them.
And Yerba Mate tea, which was, it was like PBR, Liquid Death, and Yerba Mate tea, or Yerba Mate with a Y.
That's a lot of intersection going on at this. That's a lot of different.
I think it's just the sign that like the counterculture is healing itself, right? Like
I get that all three of those brands together is like a coexist bumper sticker.
It really is. I think all three of those brands is like the life. It's like the timeline of an alcoholic.
Yes, yeah.
It's like you start with the PBR and then you do the Liquid Death and then eventually you're namasteing your way to enlightenment with your Yerba Mate tea. And that's exactly what I did. I grabbed one of those things, I popped it in the back of my moped, and I was just like slamming it like it was a beer.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yerba Mate is like spiritual bypassing the drink.
Yeah.
I think that we should just stick with Liquid Death. Thank you, Steve-O, for being sponsored by Liquid Death. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a huge fan as I am.
Because of Steve-O?
Steve-O's podcast. I don't know. I don't know if he's sponsored by it, but he like.
Is he sober? Is he sober now? Because I know that he had some issues, and then. I don't know. I mean, it's not my story to tell.
Yeah, I don't know how long he's been sober, but he's been sober for a while.
We should get him on the podcast.
Yeah, let's just. Do you have his
email? I think if we just
too?
keep saying thank you, Steve-O, thank you, Liquid Death, eventually someone will come. That's how SEO works.
I think he has butt wipes. I don't know what they're called, Steve-O's butt wipes or something.
Like the dude wipes?
If we say that enough, I'm sure he'll show up.
Yeah, I think that's how it works. I'm drinking regular old iced coffee that I made myself. No thanks to Steve-O.
I'm drinking mushroom coffee that I, got out of a bag.
You know what's weird about that mushroom stuff is that people keep calling it micro or myco dose. Like they're myco dosing.
I don't know what does that mean.
Like myco is in like mycelium, and then they're like, "Oh, I'm dosing up on mycelium," but they're saying myco dose instead of micro dose, which is when you take a little bit of mushrooms
for their coffee.
Yeah. So there's like a couple of drinks I had. I had 2 over the weekend. That was like a turkey in the woods. What is it? Turkey hen, lion's mane. Like is the stuff like there's chicken hen of the woods. I think is another one.
There's turkey tail.
Yeah, turkey tail. There's chicken of the woods, and there's lion's mane, and they put it in like a soda. And it was like in a can, and it was supposed to like get me. What do they call them? Adaptogens.
Adaptogens.
Yeah, and they called it mycodose, and that.
Well, I don't
know
like that.
It feels like I'm about to get high, and then I get really upset when I don't get high.
Yeah, that's like me at the table with a bunch of people that I kind of know, where I have to like somehow ask the server quietly, "Hey, is there any like drugs in this? Is there alcohol in this?"
Yeah. It's like when I was a server at Manuel's Tavern and that girl asked if the steak fries were vegetarian. And it was like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that
But I
dumb.
am being set up to be that
I have to
person.
like look it up. I have to go to the bathroom and look it up real quick before I even order it, so that I like at least sound smart.
That's right. Yeah. I like. I don't. Is this one of those like hard kombuchas? Because I can't have a hard kombucha. Can I just have a? Do you have regular
Yeah,
kombucha? I'll just get. Can I just
I
have
hate the
water? I'll
whole
just have water.
concept of hard kombucha. How hard can kombucha
Yeah.
get?
There's already alcohol
Yeah,
in it. Why are we making more? It doesn't have to get you
is it just
drunk.
rotten
Can it
kombucha,
just
or do you
be?
put vodka in already good kombucha? What? It just doesn't. Kombucha's already hard enough.
It's
It
spicy.
is spicy. It can be,
It's
especially when you
spicy.
put like too much ginger in there, like I do. I
Yeah.
made subalu yesterday, which is like it's like a Ghanaian drink that you make with hibiscus flower. You put a little bit of like black pepper in there, some
Mm.
cloves, and like some ginger, and like a shit ton of sugar. It's pretty good, really refreshing. It's
That
like
sounds good.
sweet
Yeah.
and spicy. There's a Mexican version of it that I never know how to say, but it looks like Jamaica, but in Spanish. Not Jamaica. I don't know. I don't remember. I don't
Jamaica.
remember how to say it. And now whoever's listening to this is probably the three people that are listening to this are like screaming it into their speaker right now, and they're like, "This guy's a fucking idiot." So we just lost, 33%.
Yeah, we lost 100% of viewership just now.
Let's talk. Let's talk about time. It's time to
Okay.
talk about the time that we
Now,
lost when we were drunk. I've been thinking about this a lot
I
lately.
you said when you texted me, I don't know, like a couple weeks ago, and you brought this up. You said that it's like constantly on your
Oh yeah,
mind.
it's like the number one theme of all of my therapy sessions is how do I make up for all of this stupid time that I lost while I was drunk and the time that I lost while recovering from being drunk.
Well, let me ask: Do you feel like you lost time in recovery? Because you're still in recovery.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally.
Okay.
You don't? If I wasn't an alcoholic, I wouldn't be in recovery.
Well, wait. What do you mean?
That kind of blew your mind. I saw that in your face.
Yes, it did. I just like went somewhere else for a second. I would like you to unpack that,
Well,
please.
like if I didn't waste all of those years drinking and smoking and just being an all-around asshole and not developing the way that I had wanted to develop, then I wouldn't have to spend even more years not drinking, learning how to not be an asshole, and like doing that in this trial and error kind of situation where I'm like, oh, was that me being an asshole? And then I'd have to like
Hmm.
consult with other people. And then they were like, oh, no, actually, we're assholes too because you were an asshole and now you're not. And then I had to learn how to not be. And so now I'm in this situation where I've spent way too much time trying to not surround myself with assholes so that I can figure out if I'm the asshole. And that's taken most of my recovery. When if I was never an asshole in the first place, I wouldn't have had to have done that.
Hmm. Well, okay. I can relate to this because um, that's been on my mind recently. Where I am like finally, maybe not finally, but like seeing the kind of people that you surrounded yourself with while drunk or while you were drinking, and then having those people still kind of be in your life in your recovery phase. And eventually it gets to the point where um, I can't, it's, I mean, sounds harsh to say, but like I can't waste any more time
Yeah.
here. Like these people were and are important to me, but the only way for me to grow is for me to walk away from this. And even in recovery, that's like really hard to do. And looking back, you go, oh my gosh, I wasted so much time, even while sober, still maintaining these kind of drunk relationships. But it's really hard to let go of that. Um, I mean, it's hard to let go of all of it, right? Like it's hard to let go because that's something that over the weekend I kind of had to. I thought about, which I think about constantly, which is I was so afraid of what sobriety would do because I was afraid that it would change me, and so I put it off for so
Yeah,
long.
dude. Yeah.
Um, and I mean the fact of the matter is that it does change you, but it's only for the better. But even that, it's like, especially when you're drinking, like I don't want to be better. I want to maintain whatever I'm maintaining right now. Or you get deluded and you think, well, I can get better despite the drinking. I can just make better choices while still drinking, and you just mess everything up anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely like I think I told you last time that when I got sober, it was like it was like this is what the prophecy has foretold. Like it was, I knew that it was time. And
Mm-hmm.
I had been pushing it back because I didn't want to do it because I was like I knew it was going to take years out of my life and I was like I'm already on a roll. Like I just made friends with this guy at the bar and we're going to start a band. And it's like we're going to
Yeah.
hang out all the time. We just planned that. Um and it's like it definitely is like a huge commitment. Honestly, it's like it's kind of like going to an allergist and getting your allergy shots, and you have to go in once a week, sometimes twice a week, for 2 years, and then it's once a month for however long it takes, and
Yeah.
and it just like it's kind of like a huge kind of thing that's where I was pushing it back. I didn't want to do it. I was scared that it would change me, but I knew that it was going to happen eventually. But I also wanted it to change me. But what happened instead was that I got older. And so I didn't change into the thing that I wanted to change into. Instead, I changed into an old guy in recovery. Which is the exact opposite. That's not what I wanted to change into because when I first got sober, I like back when I was 26, I was working for this guy who was in his 40s who had been sober for 10 years and was like this fucking weightlifting like angry ex coke addict who used to come and like pick me up and drag me to AA meetings even though I didn't want to go. And I would have to hang out with all these old drunks who like just were completely just out of their mind all the time, filled with all of this like unadulterated rage that I had to like dance around just to talk to them. They were like either smoking cigarettes constantly or they were like lifting weights constantly or both. And I was like, man, I don't want to be like some old guy who's obsessed with his recovery. I'm going to go back to drinking. And then you meet like the old
Mm.
guy who's drinking, and you're like, well, there's not much of a difference here, except like literally, I would say like one is healthier than the other. But honestly, no, there's really no difference here. And
Yeah.
I didn't really have any sort of like what I never saw like a successful person in my lifestyle that was like sober, who wasn't like always sober or something like that. So it was just like, I don't know. I just didn't want to do it, but I also wanted to do it. And now that I've done it, I am like looking back and I'm like, ah, oh, fuck. It's like you just kind of look at the timeline and you're just like, well, shit, I should have done that.
Yeah.
I should have said
Yeah.
hello to that person instead of like gotten too drunk, or like I should have been a little bit more chill at that party instead of like, drinking before the party, or like saying that asshole thing that I said while I was drunk, or like whatever. Like it's just full of like shoulda, coulda, wouldas.
Right.
And then in the end, I'm just like I just turned into the old drunk that I didn't want to be, or the old guy in recovery that I didn't want to be. I mean, I guess I'm still a drunk, right? Once a drunk, always a drunk. But it's at least I'm not an active drunk.
Right. But it sounds like you were, I mean, in those AA meetings, it just sounds like dry drunks.
Yeah,
Like it doesn't sound like, it just doesn't sound like people in recovery. And so you have that, even being kind of like, oh, I'm curious about fixing my life. There's no role models in that. There's no accessible figure in scenarios like that where you can go, okay, so it's doable, and it's also doable in a healthy way. Um, Instead, it just seems like, well, I just don't want to be like these people, and the common denominator between all of them is that they don't drink. Therefore, I'm going to keep drinking so that I won't end up like them.
yeah. Well, we didn't have John Mulaney, who doesn't drink, right? We didn't have that. We had Kyle Kinane, whose like first like album was called Whiskey Icarus, and we were like, I want to be that. And then we had Ron White
Yeah,
rolling
right.
in all the time, smelling like scotch and whiskey and like, cigars and shit, making everyone uncomfortable. And and we didn't have people being like, oh, you can do this without drinking constantly.
Right. There were a lot of, and I think that this is just because we were in Atlanta. Because in other cities you go to, there's comics that are really really working and are sober. But at the time that we were doing stand up in Atlanta, there just wasn't really those
No.
guys. A lot of it was more so like, I'm a comedian and I'm going to get sober, and also now I'm quitting. And
Yeah.
so you go, all right, well,
Now I'm a yoga instructor. Yeah.
yeah, right. So you're making completely different choices, and you just go, all right, well then it gets in your mind where if I quit drinking, then I probably won't even know how to do stand up, or I won't care about doing stand up, which is what happened with me anyway, where you just start making healthy choices, and you go, I want to keep making healthy choices, and stand up is generally in environments that would lead to me making terrible choices, which is not stand-up's fault, but it's just the people that, I don't know, that were around.
It's kind of stand-up's fault. We can blame stand-up.
Okay, I would like to blame all
Yeah.
art, honestly. All art there's like a very small percentage of art that is worth it. Stand-up does not make that
I would
criteria.
say that there's no percentage of art that's worth it, and that
Okay, I was trying to be a little liberal, but you were
I think
correct.
that even this podcast as an art form is just an incredible waste of time. And whoever's listening to this needs to get to work, needs to turn it off and get back to work, or at least listening to people working, which is
That's the second time that you've lost 100% of our.
that's my
listeners.
goal in this episode is to disenfranchise all 6 of our listeners.
I would also suggest that it's a bad move to call what we're doing art at all. Podcasting is not art. This is like, this is just like listening to two people talk at a restaurant, where you go, that's kind of interesting, but I can go in.
I
and
wonder
out.
how great my life would be if I had never discovered Norm Macdonald or like Jack Kerouac. Dude, if I never sat down in that Walden Books at the mall and sat right next to the K sections of fiction and pulled out Dharma Bums, I wouldn't be a writer. I'd probably be a history teacher. And I would be probably just as miserable as I am now, but still wouldn't be making art.
Right. Yes. I think that this is a good. This makes a good case for there being only two genre of books to be available: the Bible and the
Wow.
classics.
So I'm saying no art, and then you went another step and just went Christian nationalist with this, where you're like, the only art is
not
written by
Christian,
God.
not Christian nationalism. Just this is like kingdom theology. It's not nationalism. If everybody's Christian, it's not nationalism.
Okay, chill out, Mike Pence. All right. I thought you were going to be like, there's only two genres of books: the Bible and the not Bible, and that's what.
Well, if I'm going to be honest, it's the Bible and the Unabomber
Oh yeah.
Manifesto. That's all you need. I would like to give a shout out. I don't know if this is because of my own charm or if if it's just working out, but I was out with a lady this past couple days, and I brought up how Ted Kaczynski is my hero, and it's still going all right.
Oh really? That wasn't the game change. That wasn't a. Did she know who Ted Kaczynski was? Because that could have been why.
She did not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I left out some stuff, but I gave her what was important.
Yeah, he's a Harvard grad. He changed the way that didn't he like invent something like a satellite or some shit like that? Didn't he like actually invent like some telecommunications kind of shit?
I don't know what the application of his work became, but he was like an incredible theoretical
Is that
mathematician.
all you told? She's a Harvard grad, theoretical mathematician. Is that all you told her?
I told her that stuff, and I told her about I called it like.
And he had some very radical ideas about government, and that was all you told her, right? You're like, CIA,
that was
MI6 or CIA. I can't think. MK Ultra survivor.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a survivor of government experimentation, and he's still he's still kicking. He's doing great.
He was like, I remember he was bunked in with somebody that he hated. Oh, he hated the guy who blew the Oklahoma City bomber guy. He hated that guy.
Oh yeah. Well, his work was a little diluted compared to.
So you just lost the rest of our readers or our listeners.
No, I'm getting viewership right now, but it's not people that
you're helping the algorithm though. That's for sure.
Yeah, Ted Kaczynski. I'll say this last thing. Ted Kaczynski is a Gemini, and he's my hero. Anyway,
he was a Gemini. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was a Gemini.
That figures. That tracks. Typical Gemini.
Typical Gemini. That's right.
I think he was sober too. Let's just say that, just to make it on theme. So.
Well, he's sober now. I mean, it's not like he can get.
All dead people are sober. I mean, eventually, when you die, he's dead.
Is he? Did you
just find this out? I thought he was your hero.
Is he? I celebrate his birthday, not his death.
Well, that's because we're on two different sides of the spectrum here, I guess. I don't even know how to spell his Unabomber.
Just look up
Ted
Unabomber.
Kaczynski. Yeah, he died this year, in June.
Oh, that's right. He died with a pair of.
I messaged you about that because I remember telling you.
Yeah, you messaged. Yeah, that was a sad day. That was a strange day. It was solemn.
Was it?
Well, it was a weird day because you were the only person I could talk to about it. It's not like I could shout out like on a group text, "Hey guys, I'm not going to come to work today."
Yeah.
Ted Kaczynski died.
Yeah, I don't know if that would count as like a reason to call out of work, and you can't really make like a big Facebook.
Yeah, it's kind of like calling out hungover,
and you can't like draw a photo of him like hanging out with Tupac and Biggie, and like Kobe, and all you can't do that.
One of these days, they're going to have a hologram of Ted Kaczynski, and I don't know what he's going to be doing, but I'm sure his likeness is out there.
I genuinely think you should just keep all your Ted Kaczynski thoughts to a different podcast that you only record in the desert. It's like, that's for your desert friends.
Yeah, okay, you're right. Yeah.
This is for your Chicago friends who or
Right, right,
mourning?
right. Well, okay, for my Chicago friends, I smoked weed a couple
Oh
nights
shit!
ago.
You don't really smoke that much weed, do you?
Yeah, I was reminded immediately why I don't smoke weed because I had the person who I was with is a somatic
That's
counselor,
cool.
and so
Yeah, I
it's
love
super cool.
somatic stuff. The whole like
Yeah, oh
influx of
man,
all.
you should talk to them. They're really cool. But anyway, I had uh, she called it something psychoagenic or something. It was some kind of seizure, and uh, I used to get them a lot when I smoked weed when I was younger, and so I just stopped because it's really hard to keep the party going when someone's like seizing up in the corner. Um, so I just stopped smoking weed, and then I smoked weed here on this camping trip, and I had this like incredible moment where she was like, "All right, just like relax into it, just let yourself do this." Um, and I
Just an
reminded, I
audio
was
art form. Art. This is art. Thank you.
this is art. This is art. Um, but I had this incredible moment where I was thinking back to literally what we're talking about like why I've been so resistant to change my whole life. And it's all because I never figured out how to grieve these, like yourself leaving moments or leaving phases of your life where to really engage with your recovery there's a need to grieve the loss of your like drinking self because that was an important part of your life no matter good or bad, but being able to walk away from that in a healthy way so that you can move in a direction that's more positive or beneficial for you, there's a need to grieve over that lost time, over those drinks and that part of your life. And and not knowing how to do that because a lot of people like start drinking, like I started drinking when I was 16 maybe,
Mm.
and a lot of people just, especially with living with addiction, you never really figure out how to grieve other than just putting more stuff in you so that you can numb out. But really processing emotion, specifically grief, is a like this is how you forgive yourself, and then from both of those capacities moving into the next phase of your life. Because if you can't grieve, then you're still holding on to all this stuff that you're just not able to process. And so just taking the time to do that is really really beneficial, and it's just you never think about it because you all you want to do is just like crush it away. Like all my years drinking, like that sucks. I'm an asshole, terrible person. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done this. Shooting myself in the leg, shooting myself in the head. All these things, like I gotta just just push them down and forget about it. I'm gonna move on. I'm sober now. I'm new me. Blah blah blah. But you're not. You're still the same. You're still in that same cycle. And unless you can really attend to your wounding and that part of you that you really want to let go, you're going to stay stuck clinging to it in whatever expression of that it like manifests in.
Stuff it down with Brown. That's what you're trying to say. Yeah. Stuff it down with Brown.
Yeah,
That's what
no,
we used to
exactly.
do. Yeah. I mean, I think that's really interesting. That's kind of what I was saying is that like I knew how much time it was going to take for me to get sober was going to be too
Mm-hmm.
much time for me to become the person I wanted to be that I couldn't be when I was drunk. So I might as well stay drunk because I'm just going to lose time anyways. And then and then eventually I had to get sober just because that was how the prophecy was written. And like like and that was the issue that's what I'm always kind of struggling with is now I never had a chance to not only just grieve my drunk self, who I don't quite remember, right? Because of the phases of being up and down and like the phases of just like going into one situation and just trying to survive, like one scenario and just trying to survive, even if that scenario is fun, like hanging out and getting fucking rip roaring drunk on in your carport with all the comedians after Limerick, like super fun. Also a battle of survival when it comes to wits, because we're all just trying to like shoot the shit and like have like goof off and like, you know, try to like keep going. And it's like, if I got sober, I wouldn't be able to hang out with y'all, right? So what
Yeah.
sacrifice am I making here? Can I do that as well as like and be, you know, and be sober? And it seemed like, oh no, I would have to like take a step back and then like reintroduce myself, and like I don't, that's like so much. And so it's just like you have to grieve. There's no time to even process those changes, right? Because it's just
Right.
one scenario of survival after another, until you kind of have this, or you, I mean me, until I woke up with just this long list of half formed thoughts and like half made stories that end with being like, yeah, we had a good time, the end. You know, it was like
Right. Yeah.
there's no like punchline, there's no learning moments, there's no like, you know, there's nothing like that. There's not even like crazy like the hangover kind of moments where we're hanging out with like Mike Tyson and, you know, like trying to fight a tiger. I don't remember how that movie went.
Yeah. We're mostly just throwing up off my
Yeah.
porch.
Yeah. And people are
You
like,
know.
how was your night? And they're like, oh yeah, it was just a Tuesday. And
Yeah.
and it was like, yeah. And so it's so now I look back and I work with a lot of people who are in their 20s, and I see how they're going about it and how they're navigating it. And I'm like, whoa, should have done that. Should have
Mm.
been like, there's, you know, even if I was like the nervous one, which I am now, like in a social situation, it would have been much better to be the nervous one than like the one that was like making everyone else nervous because I was drinking too much, right? Or because I was like
Right.
trying to
Yeah.
be the funny one, or I was like the only one that was like trying to make it like a party when everyone was like, this is more of like a dinner party, you know?
Yeah.
And there's just like a lot of like grief in that. And then there's also just some things that aren't available to older people, where like there are just some like forgivenesses society wise that aren't allowed when you're at a certain age. You
Yeah.
can't like, it's, you know, you can be like an intern in your 30s or whatever, like, or later, but you're not gonna, like, when I graduated from the creative circus and I went to school, I remember when I finally got hired at my new job, no one really wanted to show me how to do copywriting because I was, well, I was like obviously hungover all the time, but I wasn't very like, um, I wasn't like this spunky, like young 20 something year old who's like trying to get out there. And so I even see that, like, especially in advertising, because it's so youth obsessed, that where I'm like having to like prove that, yeah, I'm spunky. I like, don't mind my
Mm.
crow's feet. I'm trying to make up for the things that I lost, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
and it's just kind of a weird. It's like weird. It's like this balance of being like, oh yeah, I didn't get to do that, and then also, oh, but I did something else that I'm not super proud of.
That's
Yeah,
it. That's the
yeah,
thing. That's the feeling. Like I looking back and because I don't know if you have this, but like I'll be talking about, you know, kind of lamenting about being getting my associate's degree now and just kind of going, yeah, I was like drinking in high school, doing stand up, like I just a lot of things got pushed back, or I just wasn't going to do them, and blah yada yada, story, and then someone will go, well, you did other things, and you like at first you go, yeah, I did, but well, but what? I mean, what was it worth though? Like, I yeah, from stand up you understand communication, you can You can talk to people, but it's not like that's the only place you can figure that out.
Yeah.
And it's this weird place where you go, I did have an incredible experience that is somewhat unique. However, it would be really doing me a lot of it would be doing me a service right now had I kind of just dipped my toes into that incredible experience and stayed a little bit more focused on what was
Yeah.
going to be like good for the long
Yeah,
run.
like even in that experience, I was only half experiencing it because I was too busy drinking.
Right? Yeah, you weren't even like, dude, that's we weren't even fully engaged with the thing that we were throwing
Yeah.
ourselves in.
Oh, yeah, dude. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, like I hear stories where people are like, oh, I did a lot of traveling in my 20s and it was so fun. I went from hostel to hostel in Europe. And then I'm like, yeah, I did stand up in my, I mean, I started stand up even later than you did in my late 20s. And so
Right.
like I tell them that, and then I'm like trying to think back of like all my experiences, and I'm like, yeah, I had a great time eating like leftover fries in that place. What was that place we went to outside of New Orleans where they were like, you're gonna lose service when you go down the dirt road, but you're there when you see the giant cow in the parking lot. It's like, yeah, I guess I got experiences. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's not staying in a hostel in Italy, but it's something.
Right. Yeah. I can. I remember I was on. I traveled in my early 20s where I was in the middle of Indiana, railing Ativan because I was afraid that I couldn't go to sleep. And is that the same? Is that the same as gallivanting over
Yeah,
Europe?
yeah,
Maybe, I
did I
don't
meet
know.
the love of my life? No.
Yeah, yeah. I met a lot of women who were not in a good place, who were trying to get with me, also not in a good place. Um, it's not the
Yeah,
same.
being consistently being other people's wake up calls is not, you know,
Oh,
how is not the story that you want to tell when you reach my age, right? And so there's a lot of grief that comes from that. And it's like, I don't know, sometimes it really bogs me down. It really bothers me because I have a hard time relating with people who
mhm.
who like have, I don't want to say normal, whatever, like development, but like I can't talk to people about like most stuff because I don't know. And then I'm also like not in that area of my life where I can be like, what is that? Because it's sort of expected already for me to know. And then it's like to have
Yeah,
someone to show me would mean that they would have to love me in a way that no one loves me. And so, like for them to put in that time. And then it's like, okay, well, okay, here's my life now. I have this like span that I'm looking at. I'm looking at like this piece of cake that's been like half like dropped, and then but the other half is still good. And I'm like, okay, well, how do I get in all the traveling that I want to do and have a baby and a family and like a good career and start a podcast and also be like artistically satisfied and like reach John Mulaney's level
yeah,
of fame while sober. And it's just like, all right, well, I got to get to work. And it was like what you were saying earlier. It's like, I don't have time to hang out with people who are wasting my time. But then you don't know
right.
that until much later. And then you're like, fuck,
Yeah,
I fell for it again. And then it starts all over again, and it's just like a whole big headache, and then you have to like forgive those people, which just takes more time. And then while you're doing that, you're only taking time away from people who wouldn't have done that to you in the first place, but they're also like long gone. Like that's also
yeah,
something that comes up, is you pop up and you're like, oh shit, I need to apologize to somebody. That's something that I did 10 years ago. And then you're just like, they're gone. Like long gone, and the stuff that they taught me is just now being processed, and I can't even, you know what I mean? It's just like,
yeah, yeah. It took me a decade, but it's integrated now, and I'm sorry that it took me so long. The the thing that,
And you want to like reach out and you're
dude,
like, this is not even good for them. They don't even want to see me. And
right. Well, I think, isn't that step 8 where you go like, okay, I should reach out, but it might not be worth reaching out because it might upset them more.
yeah,
For me to just show back up in their life. Um, what you made me think about though is what has helped with recovery in recovery is having like, I want 3 things, like somewhere around 3 or 4 things. These are the things that I can do. These are the things that I can accomplish. These are the things that are important, that have inherent purpose. Blah blah. Other than that, I have to really sift through the weeds of like, I have there's a lot of desires and stuff, but there's only really like 3 concrete things that matter. Um, and so being able to it really like being able to step away from something like stand up is opening a lot of doors where you can fine tune your focus, and you can really do well doing a few things instead of just kind of spreading yourself really thin trying to accomplish like a lifetime of work in 5
yeah,
years, which is that's the an addict mind, right? Like, I have to accomplish everything right now,
yeah,
you know? And it's hard to keep that reined
yeah.
in.
It's bullshit. It's bullshit. It's hard and it's bullshit. Time
Yeah. Well,
time sucks.
what is
Time is like the
yeah,
worst. And that's like what alcoholism is. It's a time suck. It fucking kills all of your it
yeah,
kills all of your time. And it's just like being in jail. I always bring it up in prison, or I always bring it up in prison therapy. I always bring it up in therapy that I feel like the Count of Monte Cristo, where like I was like mentally trying to do all of these things to be prepared for the moment of when I got sober. Except when I got sober, I didn't, the old man that helped me didn't die and then give me like this mysterious fortune so that I can like reap my revenge. Instead, I just got out and I was like, well, shit, now I know how to sword fight, but I'm also like in my 30s, and anyone who's in their early 20s can out sword fight me just because of the health. Like, you know what I mean? And it's just like, oh, why'd I do that?
yeah,
And it was, and
yeah,
I spend so much time, like, especially artistically, being like, man, I wish I had spent more of an effort in following my dreams. And then on top of that, that alone is also part of wasting time, because it's like I got so stuck in this kind of shoulda, coulda, woulda mindset while I was drinking that now it's like
yeah,
so hard for me. I have to like actively be like, oh no, I have to do this. And I have to like actively instill these habits that aren't even habits. They're like literally me intentionally choosing to do the opposite of what I want to do, which normally I just want to sit around and do nothing and like dick around, which apparently isn't what
right,
most people do. Uh, Most people have like an intention when they do things. And I've spent so much time just like watching TV and drinking, or like going to the bar and just like waiting for things to happen to me, that I had to like relearn how to make things happen for me. And the amount of time it takes to establish a foundation and get those things going in your adult life is way longer than it was when you do it, when those times are ripe. And so it's kind of like, oh man, I got to go make friends in my 30s. That's not going to happen. I got to make like good friends who aren't busy all the time. That How do you even do that? Oh, you go to a bar? Can't do that. Oh,
yeah,
you go to like, you
yeah.
go to jujitsu every day at 6 a.m. in hopes that you'll make a friend. Turns out that's the only way. and and even then you only get to hang out with them at 6 a.m. And it's like,
Right, and but what you're describing though is when you're in those when you're living with active addiction, to get out of that is a huge energetic shift. So I'm like, what you made me think of was just being really young doing stand up, and then like you're standing outside of a show smoking a cigarette. Now you're in someone's car. Now you're at another show. Now you're standing outside smoking a cigarette. Now you're going to a different open mic, and you're drinking throughout this, and you don't know exactly where your car is now,
Yeah.
or like even how to get back, and you're standing, and you're just like, there's this whirlwind that's happening, and you're just caught up in it. And it's very easy to be caught up in it because it feels like you're doing something. It feels like grinding it out at open mics feels like you're doing something. Not to say that you aren't, but it's just when you step out of that mode of being, it's such a shock to your system because now there's nothing going on, and that feels wrong. It's like that's how I get into, bad relationships where there's a need to walk on eggshells. There's a need for that intensity, and just because I can't function unless like there's something going on that's detrimental to like my mental health. Ultimately, like you need that chaos because you're patterned to it. But finding a way to move out of that, those normative like thought cycles, is a part of the grieving process, because you do have to, like, going back to what we said before, like it's scary to go sober because it's scary to change, and intuitively you have to change, but to change is to grieve. You have to allow yourself to do that, and there's no timeline to that. That's the unfortunate, like, for better or worse, there's no mark on the calendar that you can wait for and go, all right, I'm better now. It's grief is, you live with it.
Oh, it's a constant reminder. Yeah.
It's a constant reminder. You never get out of the grief. You just live with it differently. Because when you're drinking, and maybe you push back against this, but in drinking, you're still grieving. You're still grieving the person that you coulda, shoulda, woulda been, but you have a high life in your hand.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not pushing back on that at all. The whole reason you're drinking is because the whole reason I was drinking is because I was too scared to be the person that I wanted to be. And so, then when I got out of it, I was like, well, fuck, I shouldn't have been so fucking scared. And then they were like, well, it's a disease. And I'm like, oh, thank God. And it's not my fault. And, but it is, but it's like, but then there's the whole recovery process. And then you're still like, oh, okay, it's still going to be that person I could have been. And then when you get, then I finally got to the person that I could have been, but then I'm also 37. And you're like, well, now I'm like an old person that I could have been. And I never got to be like the young person that I could have been. And that's the person in their 20s. I'm not saying 37 is young or old, but what I'm saying is that like I don't have like the energy to like get up on stage and like hit those mics with that intention like I would totally do now if I fucking wanted to. But I also don't really want to hang out with a bunch of 20-something-year-olds trying to do that again. I mean, Ian Aber did, and they are doing great, but like maybe that's what I need to do, is to get through that. But it's like there's just like a lot of unlearning, which is part of that grieving process, right? It's like that's where it hits you all the time. It's like I'll be talking to someone who is much younger than me, and they'll have this like system set up, and I'm like, well, fuck, why didn't I think of that? and they're like, oh yeah, I'm with this system I'll have everything that I want. Like I was talking to somebody recently about their queerness, and they told me that they were happy that they were able to like come out as queer because they had such a long journey in figuring it all out before they hit 30. And I was like, cool, thanks for saying that.
Yeah, good.
Thanks for saying that directly to my face. But it's like
but and the thing, the thing that it just like, as the prophecy was foretold in the book of Buffkin, like
terrible book.
It, it's a very short
Yeah,
book, but
a lot of pictures.
it's the lot of pictures. Yeah, a lot of
a
blurry pictures.
lot of doodles in the
Um,
margins of that
the
book.
the thing that I feel like maybe is just a shift of perspective is this idea that you are who you are now, and like I mean, just lean into the being the prophet
Yeah,
that you
yeah,
are,
yeah, yeah. But
because
still,
you
that's
know,
not grieving. Like that's still like part of grieving, isn't it? Like you have to accept that's the end of Elizabeth Kubler Ross's, thing. Is that her name? Don't shake her head. You have to have acceptance, right? But it's like,
yes, like so lean in, so accept who
but it
you
keeps
are.
popping up.
Wear the headband that I know your hair wants to be in. Like just just accept what has happened. Oh my gosh, this is like too aggressive, but the idea we all this is so hard for me to do. So I'll just point. I'll direct this toward myself. I don't want to. I don't want to do this to you. But
Yeah, this isn't a therapy podcast where you're my therapist, okay?
well, even if it was like, especially because it's like I would be a terrible therapist if I was calling you out like this. So I'm just going to say, for me, it's hard. Yeah, see, this is good. This is good. This is how you should be always. You look like a tennis, not a pro,
You have to tell them that I
but
put on the headband because they can't see it. Yeah, thank
you
you.
are in this. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
I accept this.
Anyway, so the thing that I can't like, it's hard for me to sit with who I've been and where I've been, and looking back and going, man, I should have been I should have been different somehow. But then kind of accepting like, and this is what recovery is, but just accepting like, okay, I was set up to be a certain way, and the fact that I'm here now is nothing short of a miracle. Like I should be still living how I was living, but for some reason something clicked and I got out of that. And now we're starting at square one. It does feel like I'm socially inept. It's more than it's very apparent that fiscally I am downwind. But to move on from there and just accepting like, holy crap, what an experience. Even addiction can teach us a lot. Um, and just being able to like walk with that. Like addiction is not something that everybody gets out of, and it's not something that everybody experiences. So it's this weird, unique feeling of knowing what it's like and then also getting
Yeah.
out of it.
Yeah.
And having those two things be true about yourself is, I mean, it doesn't make the years lost go away, but it does make the years ahead a little bit. You approach them
Yeah.
differently, and you approach them in a way that you never could if you didn't have those two experiences of active addiction and recovery.
Yeah. I mean, that's where the Count of Monte Cristo kind of thing comes in, where it's like, I do find myself with like a certain set of skills that I've been able to utilize for, to be successful in my own way. But at the same time, I learned those skills in the dungeons of whatever prison island that I can't think of right now. It would have been so literary if I just popped out with that shit. But honestly, I watched the movie recently, and that's why I know.
Was he on the island that Napoleon was exiled
No,
to?
but he went to that island. That's why he got.
He went to
That's
that
why he
island,
got
but the prison was
Count of
something
Monte
else.
Cristo'd. I don't want to push my curls down,
I can't
so that's why I
remember.
took my headband off because I'm trying not to.
Gotcha. Yeah, you don't want to ruin
Yeah,
what you got.
yeah. It'll
Yeah.
push the curls on my crown head down if I do that, and then I'll have to be like, I should have not done that again, and live with that regret.
No, live with your locks looking like this.
I think the thing about it is there is a lot of shame. And this is one reason, well, I don't want to be an anti-AA podcast, but it seems to be one of the things that I found about, like, even when we started this podcast, we were like, let's not get too caught up in being like, just tell a bunch of traumatic stories,
Right.
which is what everyone wants to hear. That's why anyone who has listened to it to the 55-minute mark right now, or less if I change it, is waiting is to hear some horrific story where we, like, ended up doing something terrible. For instance, like this one time, no, what I'm saying is, it's like there's a lot of shame that comes from addiction, and a lot of like internal shame that makes it hard to operate outside in the world, because there's, at least for me, this assumption that no one else is going through the shame that I'm carrying, where it's like, oh, I used to be a piece of shit. Like sometimes I tell people I'm a recovering asshole. And in a lot of ways, yeah, like I was, very manipulative, but also now I work in advertising, and like I have to be a little manipulative. That's part of the game. And so, like, that's where I'm using my Count of Monte Cristo skills for good, right? But it's like, it doesn't feel like a good thing when I used to have these dreams of, I got like, you know what, I'm going to tell you this because we're in this whole, we're having a whole theme where I just divulged my deepest, darkest secrets to you on the podcast. But like, I bought a unicycle when I was drunk in 2014, and I bought it because I've always had this secret desire to do some, don't shake your head. Like I think like acrobatics and like circus stuff and like miming and that kind of shit. I always thought that kind of like body work was super cool, and I've always wanted to do it, but I couldn't talk about it because no one wants to talk about that stuff. And I was walking by Outback Bikes in Little Five Points, and they had a unicycle in the window, and I had been drinking at Java Lords down the street, and I just happened to have a credit card on me, and I bought a unicycle for like 200 and something bucks, and I have had it for less than a decade. Let's say over a decade because it sounds cooler, but I bought it in 2014, and don't do the math. And I've ridden it 0 times. That's not true. I've ridden it around my apartment.
Yeah, I was going to say you
I've
must
fallen
have.
a lot. The thing, I've tried to
Yeah.
ride it outside so that I don't fall. The thing about trying to ride a unicycle outside is kind of like when you first start getting sober, is right when you get on the unicycle, everyone comes up to you and like, is that a unicycle? And then they're like, can you juggle? Ride the unicycle. And you're like, I'm just learning. Can you hold my hand? And they're like, whoa, a unicycle. And you're like, I'm really just trying to figure this out, and I'm trying not to fall. And they're like, that's so cool. I wish I could do that, but I just couldn't. I don't have the balance. I'm like, well, I don't either, but I'm still trying to do it. And then every time I left
Yeah.
with it, every time I left the fucking house with that unicycle, immediately, right when I left the door, is that a unicycle? So now it's been a decade of me I've moved 7, 8, 10 times. I have no idea how many times. I've had people try to buy it off of me. I won't let it go because it's my unicycle. But now I got really upset because there's this like circus performer that I started following called Tiny Girl Big Show. Yeah, Tiny Girl Big Show. She's like 23 or some shit. And she rides a unicycle and like shoots a bow and arrow with her feet. And I was like, man, could have been me. Could have been me if I was brave enough to get on that unicycle. I could be working at the Ren Fair instead of working at this agency, and I could have been shooting arrows with my feet instead of like writing radio ads. And I'm sure that they're like, wish I was writing radio ads instead of doing this.
Yeah, I'm sure they are.
But it's like, and then I start looking like, oh, how much time is it going to take for me to learn how to even, if I wanted to join the circus, best case scenario, I get to ride the unicycle, maybe learn how to juggle, do some crowd work. I'm never going to be on the front. I'm never going to be on stage shooting arrows with my feet. Not at my age, not with my obligations. And that breaks my heart. And sometimes like that's where I'm like, that's like the grief that I'm constantly running into is I'll run into something and been like, oh man, that was a dream I had for 10 minutes and I never followed through on it because I got drunk instead. And it's like every fucking time.
Yeah.
It's like, and
Yeah.
even my career was me being like, okay, well, I have this dream and I can handle it. Like I even got into stand up because I was like, well, at least I can keep drinking. Like it was all kind of like, pushing all of these dreams, but then like, oh, but I got drunk instead every time.
Well, it's this like, it's almost like a need to grieve you not believing in
Every
yourself.
winter,
No, or not.
every summer, when Chicago
Yeah.
hits summer, it is like crazy because the snow melts and people just go crazy. And every summer, I'm like,
Mhm.
this is the summer I learned how to ride that unicycle, and I never do it. I didn't do it this summer. I'm not going to do it next summer, I bet, unless someone hears this podcast and wants to show me how to ride. I just need someone to hold my fucking hand and not make fun of me while I ride the unicycle. That's why it's just like
Yeah,
recovery is you need support. You need support of people who care and who can help you without asking you a bunch of questions. What were you going to say? I'm sorry. I'm just like, you want to go get it? It's right over there.
show it to me. Show it to me. Show it to the people that are. This is an audio medium, but this is fine. I was saying that Jody needs to grieve. Oh, now he's back. That is a unicycle. I feel like you told me about that when you bought it, back in 2014.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've also never seen you. I would have held your hand.
Bullshit. You would have now. You wouldn't have back then, but now you will. You couldn't hold my hand back then because you had one hand on your drink and the other one was smoking a cigarette. And I.
That's okay. That's fair. That's fair. You could have leaned on my shoulder at least, as long as I could like smoked in the house or something. But I was saying though, what it sounds like. Okay, there's like two things that are coming to my mind, which is like grieving your lack of belief in yourself, and then doing whatever you will with that information now. Like, I mean, because it still sounds like you are dealing with this problem of like, I mean, I don't know, shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Are you not? Yeah.
Now?
You don't have a unicycle story? You don't have what's in your. You have to have something in. Like, I mean, it's not. I every day for me. What I'm saying is that I accept it. I have to come to this acceptance, or through straight denial. Sometimes I have to come to this face the music moment, but it just happens almost every day where I'm like reminded of this lost time, and then I have to grieve that a little bit, and then like move on.
That's why I wanted to talk about boxing last week, because I remember when I was like 23 or 24, and I was going to the gym. I'll skip through this because I talked about it in the last episode, but I was going to the gym every day, and then like to the point where trainers were coming up to me and asking like, do you want to like do this? Do you want to fight for like, do you want to like do like an amateur comp or whatever? And I remember like that was so cool. I stopped caring about stand up, and I thought that this is the coolest thing. this is what I thought that I wanted to do stand up. I want to do this. And I was so afraid of, because it was like sunken cost fallacy almost. Like I've invested so much time in stand up by this point. All my friends are doing it. I still love drinking, blah, blah, blah. Maybe I can like keep doing this, but like keep my feet in both worlds. But eventually, like you just like get so spread far away from your center that neither you're not in either camp. You're not doing stand up. I wasn't boxing, and then eventually I was just drinking, which is why now I'm so on it, or I beat myself up about this more so than just being aware of it. Where if I'm not totally focused in one world and I'm like trying to like divide my time, to the detriment of being good at anything, then I have to give up something. I have to like tap out and say I can't do this. I need to like devote myself to just this and let this go, because I'll just end up doing the same thing where you end up doing neither.
Yeah, dude.
So yes, I can relate to the unicycle, because there was a lot of.
Should I get my boxing gloves out too?
There's
Because
so
I got
much
my
time.
boxing gloves.
Yeah, bring them out.
I got all my toys
Yeah.
that I never followed through on. Yeah, I mean, the focus is the thing. I mean, that's why I reached a point where I was like, okay, well, I know that I can write, so I'm just going to focus on that, and then I'll focus on getting sober. And then even then, I didn't even focus on writing so much as I just like relied on, I don't want to say raw talent, but maybe like a godlike kind of talent, like maybe like some sort of, I don't want to say godlike, something bigger than that, some sort of talent that's like a little bit more insurmountable than. I'm just relying on like my huge giant talent. No, something bigger than that. Something. Now you get what I'm doing. Okay, thanks for finally laughing. I know, because it wasn't that funny. So like, like I was relying on like my own skills of being slightly witty, and being drunk kind of helped me do that better, but I wasn't following through on it. I wasn't, trying to stay sober enough to like really push my work. And then I found that like some of the other things that I like to do it was just me trying to find more time not to write. Like drinking was just another reason not to write, right? Because I didn't want to do it, because that meant that I had to face my own shit, and I didn't want to do that. I'm not going to do that. And so, I ended up doing comedy because I wanted to write, but I didn't want to talk about my feelings. So I ended up just making jokes about like, poo-poo and how pooping is my favorite thing in the world. Like that was one of my jokes, right? And like about my DUI and stuff like that. Like I never really talked about my emotions, so I never really wrote. I mean, that we never really wrote anything. We would like be like, is that a joke? And then we would like go do a shot. And then, eventually I got into advertising, because like, well, now I don't have to write about my feelings at all. If anything, I get to write about, how right now you can get 5 quarts of STP oil for only $27.99. Like, I don't need to write about like any sort of like emotional depth. And then now I'm reached this point where I'm like, man, I wonder if I had actually like focused on that instead of just like relying on the talent, right? Like, I wonder what would happen here along like where I'm at now. And that's not like to say that I'm not going to do it. Like there's that, sorry, I don't mean to like, let you interrupt me, but shut the fuck up. The whole thing is like, one thing that always kind of brings me back on track is there's this Chinese proverb that I read in a comic book. And it says the best time It was about Green Arrow, and Green Arrow deals a lot with lost time too, and about his family and time that he lost while because he didn't even get to raise his son, whose name is Hawk, Connor Hawk, and so he don't stop laughing. Um, but it says that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. And Connor really took that to heart when Green Arrow said that to him. And and it's just like I keep kind of bringing that back, where it's like, all right, well, I didn't do these things because I was too busy struggling with my own shit, probably because of my trauma, and I have a disease. But now I can do those things. But then that's when you have the grief, because you're like, oh, fuck, now I got to go learn something. And that's hard. And it's harder now that I'm older because I'm dumb and I'm only getting dumber. And I have all these bad, dumb habits that I learned while I was drinking. So now I got to not only unlearn those things and also learn how to learn while I'm also dumb because I'm old. It's like a lot already on the plate. But then that's when you just but you just got to do it. I mean, if I was able to drink, then I'm able to get up. If I was able to get up and go to a bar and drink, then I'm able to get up and do this podcast. I'm able to get up and go to jujitsu, and I'm able to like sit down and make a plan and like study and like think about my life with intention. And that's the hardest thing for me is trying to do things intentionally. Because when I was drinking, I was just floating, from one bar, like you were saying, you're in that whirlwind and it feels like you're doing something. But now you actually have to do something, and that shit sucks. I hate doing stuff.
It's 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 a rootlessness.
A rootlessness?
Rootlessness.
Rootlessness?
Rootin' tootin' lessness.
It's a rootlessness. Okay.
Rootlessness, yeah, where you're just floating. You're going here and there and there, and like someone could say something, you go, oh, now I'm going over here, and someone could say something else, and oh, now I'm going
you're
over here.
You're tooting more than
and
you're rooting, is what you mean.
You're tooting a lot.
You're not rooting so much. You need to be rooting more than tooting. That's why it comes first. It's not tooting and rooting, it's rooting and tooting.
It's rooting and tooting, yeah. And so in recovery, and this has taken, I'm so early on in sobriety anyway. I'm really early on in recovery because it just feels like I'm starting over every day. But the becoming rooted in your life, which goes back, the 3 or 4 things that we can focus on, that allows for us to, when we find a place and just center ourselves and go, all right, there's a lot of things that I could do. A lot of those things are a distraction and a waste of time. What are the 3 things that are going to help me grow? And becoming centered in that so that your foundation gets stronger and stronger. It's like a meditative practice. That's a way to get rooted. Loving where you are, finding ways to become a part of your community, and recovery is all about support, but in general, finding ways to be in your body, in the place that you exist, so that you can nourish where you live, but also be nourished by it and grow, grow where you are, which is it's hard to allow yourself to do, because there's always something. There's always the grass is always greener, but that's not true. The grass is always brown. It's brown no matter where you are. It's brown where I am, brown where you are, and it's brown in the best place you could think of. There's always going to be an issue. There's always going to be a problem. There's always going to be an escape that you would want to, have a hatch for. But finding ways to stick with it. It's like a relationship. being with somebody is great. There's billions of people out there that you could be with, but this one person, I'm going to commit to them, and we're going to grow stronger together, not in any kind of like codependent way, but we're going to become stronger in pillars. Life is going to hit us, and we're going to be strong for ourselves and each other, and we can weather the storm. Finding ways for your community to be like that, but finding ways for yourself to be like that, for yourself and for others.
Yeah. You know, I when I was first really struggling with this a few years ago, because it took some time for my recovery to like really kick in, because there is like the horror of getting sober, and then there's the horror of everything, all the time that you've wasted while you were drunk, and then there's the horror of recovery, and you're like, oh my god, the horror. And but when I was first struggling with it, I was talking to a friend of mine, and you reminded me of it when you started talking about rootin' and tootin'. And and I was thinking like they told me about this. I'm trying to remember. It's like a Buddhist philosophy, or maybe it was a talk or something that they heard. But the idea was that like to be happy, and to be like well-rounded and fully developed or whatever, there are branches that you have to tend to, like a bonsai tree. And one of them is like community. Another one is like spirituality, self-realization. And I don't remember the other ones, but one of them was like that part of that self-realization was like dealing with the past and what you've done, who you are, and where you're at in that journey of building or rebuilding, I guess. And that's kind of like, if you break it down into that, that's really helped me kind of understand how to approach my life. Because I was like, because you have like your career, you have your way you make your money, and then you have like your artistic outlets or whatever, whatever outlet that you have, and then you have like your community or family. You have that kind of foundation, and then you have yourself. I think that's what it was. And you have to tend to those like you would a garden. You have to like go out and talk to friends and try to build that community, try to be there for people. And that's the hardest part, honestly, in my recovery, is trying to like build that community. And then you have to deal with your own shit, which is part of your self-realization. And you also got to do better at your job and go further on that so that you make money, and you got to like keep pushing yourself and artistically or whatever that outlet is, so that you have like a development there, which I've never done. It was always just like, oh, things happen to me and then I react, and then sometimes it goes good and sometimes it doesn't. And then that's where like intentionality comes in, which, Buddhism is all about intentionality. Even when I first started doing yoga, that fucked me up. They were like, bring your intentions onto your mat. I'm like, what is my intention is to do yoga? What does that even mean?
Yeah.
But it kind of like transfers over to be about the things that you're focused on to try to rebuild it. And it grows like a plant, which means it grows slowly, which sucks. Because when I first got sober, I was like, okay, I'm sober.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. And they were like, okay, well, here's your like shitty patch of dirt. Like you were saying, everything's brown. I just think that like everything on our end is like brown and a little salted, and like it's got like a broken down car, and there's like
But I did that for fun. I salted the earth for fun.
Exactly.
I didn't know that I was going to do this.
There's like a bench press in the front of it, like in the front yard. Yeah, exactly. You did it for fun. And then now you're like, oh, I needed that.
Yeah, I needed like all of this soil, but I messed up. I poured like surge and salt on this.
Surge and salt.
I don't know what I was doing.
Surge and salt.
but that's a really important thing because it's very like um, it's very like Christian in the idea that like you can only be defined by community. You're only going to become a fully realized human being by having eyes on you and informing you, telling you who you are. Like you can look in the mirror all you want, but you're going to come out with some kind of idea of who you are, but you can't really tell you yourself who you are. You need others around you. You need that support system to be able to tell you like, okay, you're a little off track here, or you're doing fine. But our sense, we delude ourselves into thinking that we're better or worse than we really are. We need help from outside sources, which is why having a partner is good, having community is good. These are ways in which we are, it's a feedback loop. And we are better and better defined by those relationships becoming deeper and stronger. And through that, like something like a vocation emerges and is like cultivated, um, like a like career or something else that you're like good at, that someone could say, hey, I noticed that you're like good at this. um, Here's a way to make money at it, and or here's a way to just
Yeah,
do it.
that's always a big
And but
milestone,
you
is when
need,
someone notices something and you're like, oh, you've noticed me.
yeah,
Sorry. Yeah.
it's big. No, you're fine. I have to go pee anyway. um, so, so I'm gonna walk
Okay.
away.
Pee break. Tom's background has a rosary, a picture of Mary Magdalene, I guess, some floral luggage that only a grandmother would own, something that looks like the apple from Assassin's Creed 2, 3, the Ezio trilogy. So I guess that's like, it's got like a cross on it and it's like a round thing. There's a there's a cross necklace hanging on the wall, and then from a strange distance is a framed picture of a raccoon. And that's Tom's background. Hey, and we're back.
I thought of something while I was peeing.
What?
Um, Grief is also done in community. Um, it's not something that you can do alone. It's definitely not recommended to be done alone, and it's something that it's almost impossible to do it by yourself. You need support, and also with grief, there is a need to help others. There's a to be served and to serve. There, like you understanding how much you can do while with grief is really important, but not collapsing in on yourself is really, really vital, because that's where grief overtakes you and you're not able to get out of it. And it becomes this, it's just a loop of self-loathing and I mean it's like, it's not self-idealization, but it's just it's egotistical thinking, it's self-perpetuating thought. But if you're with grief in community, then there's this way of seeing other people, even through the lens of grief. And they, just by being present, are able to help you walk little by little. Because it feels like in sobriety, especially like when I first got sober, it was like, there's a lot of stuff I was ignoring, and I wasn't really able to tune in and see how much I was crawling and how much help I really, really needed, until I was on my hands and knees, just going, please, something, anything, help me. Um, but without community, like, it's really, really easy to get lost in grief,
Yeah.
and it's hard to get
Oh
out of
yeah.
it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a strong community here in Chicago, And so especially when I first got sober, it was hard. And I was with people who had no idea, like the people that I did know really had no idea what I was going through. And I couldn't really tell them because I also had no idea. And so it was just a lot of really cringy Facebook posts and a lot of just feelings everywhere. When I first started doing jujitsu, I felt like every time I rolled with someone, I'd be like, "Oh yeah, this is great for my recovery." And I've been really feeling all these feelings. And when I first started doing yoga and I like started talking to people, which means, I mean, I must have been like 3 years in recovery by then, but I hadn't been talking to anyone, really like about it, like openly, except for my therapist who gets paid to listen to me. So it doesn't count. Um, she would hate that I said that, and she listens to this podcast, so I'm probably going to hear that. But like when I started, going and doing like a lot of like, somatic stuff started coming up in therapy, and I would just like was itching to tell people like, okay, you don't know me, but I'm 3 years sober, and then all of this stuff happened, and then when I did my forward fold, I had this huge emotional experience, and I just wanted to tell you. And they're like, cool. I'm gonna okay.
Yeah,
You're freaking me
yeah.
out. And it's like you definitely need that like I was definitely missing that like mirror of myself. Like something to show me how to
Mm,
normalize and show me how to like not just like show me how to be or show me how to live, which I think is a Jason Isbell song, about recovery, but like just to give me like a mirror of where I stand socially a little bit. And I've been getting that a lot lately, which has been making me have to come to terms again and again and again with this grief. And a lot of it has to do with because I've been hanging out, because I work with a lot of people who are considerably younger than me, and I've been interacting with a lot of other people, and I'm starting to get into like a situation where I have like leadership roles, either like assigned or unassigned, and I'm speaking with people who don't have as much experience as I do in different things, but I'm not used to speaking to people as if I have experience. And so I have to like reconfigure how they're seeing me because they're actually looking at me for advice. Like you were saying, like helping other people to serve and be served. So I'm at this point where I'm serving, but as I'm serving, I'm like, this is weird. What is this? Like I feel there's a part of me that's like, what is this? What am I doing? I'm enjoying it. And it seems like I'm helping. And then there's a part of me that was like, and where the fuck was I when I needed my own help? And then there's like that resentment that comes with the grief. You know what I mean? Like, oh, so this guy's 26 and he gets to use all of the knowledge that I had to get at 37 and get it 10 years before I got it. This piece of shit. What the fuck? Why didn't I get that? And then there's a part that's like, of course, here you are, my child. You know what I mean? Like, and it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's
No,
just a duality
that's
that's
it.
it's so hard to struggle with. And I come home and I'm like still inside feeling that lonely alcoholic who is scared of like my own potential. And then I also feel this like, oh, this is the potential. I'm doing the thing that I want to do and thought was taken from me, but I'm doing it, but it feels different because I'm not like because of so many different factors. And that's the grief is just like, oh wow, I'm here
Right.
and I need to remind myself that I'm here. And I've spent so much of my time saying I'm not here or this will happen and that will happen or waiting for the future or thinking about the past that I have to like rethink and relearn how to not be stuck in my grief there.
And the other thing to keep in mind is that all of your lessons, all the things that you now have it's not even knowledge, right? Like your experiences that provided wisdom for you, on top of any kind of knowledge that you picked up along the way. But the thing to keep in mind is that none of that stuff is yours. Like none of that stuff is like it's stuff that you have. It's stuff that you personally picked up, but none of it has to. It shouldn't stay with you. Like this 26-year-old kid who is a young upstart ad guy. I mean, the fact that you're around is it's like building. It's not intergenerational, but it's like building. It's just making things easier for people who come behind you. Like, which is what all of these kind of experiences should be. Like the more I mean, you know, the first shall be last, all that, like the verse, but like you
is that a Bible verse from the only book ever published, the Bible?
Yeah, well, one of but the thing, right, like you picked up all this stuff that can now be freely given instead of other people having to like painstakingly find it by either falling into their own addictive patterns or just messing up when they don't have to. You can be there and say, hey, I know this is hard, or I know what was happening right now. This is what I know from my experiences, and maybe it'll help. And if you, I mean, you can pick this up, you can leave it, but this is how I can serve. And I think that that's what really helps me to grieve and also just keep going, which is I'm in a really unique position where I can help.
Yeah.
Because there's, I mean, what else is there really?
Yeah.
We're supposed to help everybody.
Well,
you know?
I mean, that's why we started this podcast, was because we were like, well, we know a lot about this stuff, and it seems like no one's talking about it in a way that we feel like would be helpful. I mean, I guess there are people I mean, there's a shit ton of people.
Yeah, but are those people willing to say how resentful they are of helping?
Exactly. Like, someone needs to address that. We're not heroes. We don't want to do this.
Yeah, it's like the only skill I have is to help. So I'm going to do this begrudgingly, but I will help.
There's definitely a lot of that where I'm just like, God damn it. Okay, this is how you do it.
Yeah, there was a time I was even thinking about this today when I got kind of like I got beat up in New York a couple times, and there was this one time where a guy like walked out into, it was like November, Coney Island. He fell off the railing on off the pier, and he walked in the sand toward the beach, and he fell. And I looked at the person I was with, and I was smoking a cigarette, and I just let out a huge sigh of like, I guess I'll go see what's happening. I guess I'll go help. And then you go out and, you know, whatever happened. But like, there's it's something that I wrestle with a lot, where it's this begrudging, like, I guess I'll help. But then you do help. It's like, I don't know. That's holding both those things feels wrong to do that. But I don't know. It's something to work on.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, I'll help someone, and I'm like, stop smiling at me. Stop. I don't want to help. I don't stop saying that you're thankful for me being here, because I'm not thankful.
See,
for
this is
helping
why. This is why you're a prophet, because you're a cranky old man who's helping the younger people figure it out.
I mean, there's also I have a hard time sorting through the help. Like, I think I told you this one time where someone at work was afraid of going on stage. And I was like, you know, there's someone in this audience that wants you to fail. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah. And that means that you have to do better. And she was like, no. And I was like, she's like, that actually makes it worse. And I was like, no, spite is your motivator. Spite and anger. You have to do better so that person doesn't win. And she was like, this isn't helping at all. And it was like right before she had to go up on stage. And so I have to sort through that shit where I'm like, oh yeah. So, you know, just be happier or something. And then I can't be like, yeah, if you want to fall asleep on the train, make sure you're wearing multiple jackets, because then you look homeless. And, you know,
Well, and that's like being able to read the room when you're on stage is similar to reading someone and going, okay, I know what kind of help you need.
Kind of.
Like, you don't need the help that I would need in your situation. I can give you something else,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I think it's also about reading yourself when you're in the room and being like, oh, maybe I'm the problem. Uh,
Oh, yeah, being able to say, look, I wish I could give you advice. I am definitely not the guy to give you advice right now. You should probably talk to somebody who's a little bit more bubbly.
exactly. Yeah. Someone who has a
Yeah.
little bit more of a background in being happy. Um, I can I can help you get out of depression. That I know. Not completely out, but I can I can help you mask it at least.
Yeah. I can't help you lock the door on depression. I can help you close it, kind of.
Or at least look at it from like 100 feet, learn to live with it. I can teach you how to like not bring it around when you don't want it, you know. And if you want to figure out I can teach you that when's the right time to smoke weed and drink and when's not. I know that.
Yeah, and this lady is just going, I just needed someone to give me a pep talk.
Yeah.
I don't need whatever is happening right now.
They're like, I just wanted career advice. And it's like, well, you asked the wrong person. And that is my first advice. Don't ask anybody for career advice.
No. No, don't ask me for career advice.
Especially me.
Yeah. Yeah, especially me.
But yeah, grief and lost time. I guess that's the end of the episode.
It's weird to end it with saying just don't ask us about anything, but I guess that's where we're ending it. Don't ask us for
Well, that's
career
the
advice.
thing that comes out of it. And I think it has to do with something I bring up a lot is like emotional frontiersmanship, where I feel like there was never a blueprint in what I'm experiencing now. It was like AA or no way. That was good. AA or no way. And so I had to like figure this shit out on my own. I didn't want to go to AA. I didn't want to be sad all the time. And now what I'm dealing with is I'm doing it. People are doing it behind me, and I'm mad at them for it. Right? There had to have been some fur trapper who like saw like St. Louis and was like, "What the fuck? Like, where was this when I was bleeding out of my leg?" You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of how it feels. It's kind of like when someone was like into a band and then that band went mainstream, and you're just like, "No, This is like I'm happy for them, but also that was my thing," and like there's a little bit of resentment, and I think that also comes with the grief. There's a little bit of like pride, which I think comes with the grief, and then that's the duality of being an alcoholic. It's just like how we want to do everything, but we don't want to do anything. We also don't want to help people, but we want to help everybody, because otherwise our existence is nothing. And it's that's just part of being reminded of the grief that we have to survive every day. The end. All right, good night, everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I have nothing to add on that.
All right, that was functioning. I will see everyone in 2 weeks, and hopefully you enjoy the episode. If not, then you could go listen to 1,000 other sober podcasts that have awkward comedians trying to work out their feelings. So talk to you guys later. Don't please listen to us. Listen to us. Don't go to other podcasts. Bye.